And I'm Krista Sampson. I'm here with Victor Sampson, and this is the ADI deeper dive into second grade, which my favorite grade. I taught second grade. And so I will hand it over to Vic. I will be moderating the webinar, and thanks for coming.
So let's talk about the investigation. Let's get into the deeper dive. So for second grade, we've got two versions of our book. We've got one that's written for Texas and one that's written for the NGSS. So this is the Texas version of this, and this one's all aligned to the TEKS here. So it includes physical science, earth space science, and life science investigations. That's the table of contents there. We also have an NGSS edition. Why we had to do two is two different sets of standards, and we really wanted to write all of our investigations so they target specifically. It's not like it kind of meets that. So in the NGSS edition, there's also physical science, life science, and earth space science investigations, but they're different because there's different sets of standards of expectations for kids in different parts of the country. So what we wanted to do today is kind of show you an example of a life science investigation. We're going to call this one's called Bees and Plants. Kind of show you how we set it up, walk you through this, what this ends up looking like. Please ask any questions as we're going through, as we want to be as helpful as we possibly can. So when you first do one of these investigations, what we usually recommend doing is getting into the Learning Hub and entering your book code that comes with your book. And when you get there, you'll see the library of all the investigations in there. Once you get to those investigations in that library, you can click on the presentation mode and it'll bring up basically your slide deck for your investigation. So what I did here, just because we're on a webinar and I didn't want to be moving back between different windows, is I just took a screenshot of what that looks like. So here, this is the very first slide of the task stage for this investigation called Bees and Plants. So you can project this up on your screen, and it really starts off with, hey, I'm going to show you a phenomenon, and it's a newscast about a beekeeper in Central Texas. And then you can click onto the next page and we'll actually show the video. I'm going to show you this too, so you can kind of see how we set things up on this.
Despite the scorching summer, we did see increased rainfall during the spring, which led to a wildflower boom that boosted the honeybee population. A great sign for a population that had been declining in recent years. And while some simply see the flying insects as a nuisance, we paid a visit to the Texas honeybee farm to see just how crucial they are to our ecosystem. Mention the word bee, and you'll have Tanya Phillips buzzing with excitement. Any bee, a passion for nature and curious mind make her well suited over my head for the job.
On this property, I have probably about 50 to 70 colonies of bees, but they're scattered all around.
Millions of bees live on our Southwest Austin property, Texas honeybee farms.
They're already awake, right?
Yep. Tanya tells me, while honeybees may be small,
I'm getting ready to open the hive.
their environmental impact is huge.
They're responsible for about a third of the food that we eat. There are foods that I love, like blueberries, apples, things that are pollinated by bees.
They also help create medicines, provide food for wildlife, and prevent soil erosion. The city of Bee Cave understands their importance. Months ago, they became the first city in the U.S. to protect its bees, declaring them honored residents of the city.
When I open a hive, I'm just looking for a problem,
which include a parasite known as the varroa mite, which is like a flea on a dog.
The varroa mite chews on the fat bodies of the bees, which depletes their nutrition and makes them weaker.
Tanya also wants to check in on the queen to make sure she's laying eggs.
Does the queen have a little crown? How do you know?
She does. She has a little crown.
No.
Jokes aside, the queen would be nothing without her workers.
And the worker bees are the eyes and ears and brains, and they do all the work. They know everything that's going on around, and they communicate that through dancing inside the hive to the rest of the bees and to the queen. So they tell her what to do.
And Tanya wants people to know that just like humans, bees need space and respect.
If you're swatting them, if you're stepping on them, or if you try to open their bee colony or cut a limb off a tree that has bees in it, then of course they're going to sting.
Is there any way to outrun a bee?
No way. No. They can go, I think they can fly up to 16 miles per hour. So if you're faster than that, yes.
And last but not least, Tanya says, if you come across a hive, simply let it be.
So this idea of introducing like bees are important, and also kind of touches on this idea that their bee populations have been in decline. So what we have the kids do then is, as they're watching the video on their handouts that they have, which you can download from Learning Hub as well, is anything you notice or wonder. So write down anything like that, and then you give kids a chance to share out all of the things that they heard or their experiences with bees, anything like that at that point. What you want to do as the teacher in that case is record these ideas and on a anchor chart. So these are examples of some things that kids often say after watching that video, right? And what you're hoping to do is, as they're bringing up all of these benefits, and that's usually what they bring in, is then you can tie that to the guiding question, the investigation, which is really what would happen if all the bees disappeared in Central Texas, right? So from once you introduce that question to them at a time that makes sense, right? It usually comes out naturally in conversation. You can write that up on the board, and then they can write that down in their handout. So that's where they'll be following along on that, of trying to figure that out, that piece. Now, from there, that's the task stage. So we move into the idea stage. So already in that video about the phenomenon, because it was a news video, they were already talking about some of the benefits of bees. They talk a little bit less about flowers and kind of the other things of like what role bees play in terms of like pollination or seed dispersal kinds of thing. So what we do is we then introduce those ideas with a video. And what we try to do is with this video is we start introducing these science ideas that they're responsible for in the standards, but not without having to tell them the exact answer to those things. And what we do is we use the videos to help animate these new ideas, as well as use words coupled with orally or sound to help them kind of read and make sense of them. So let me show you what that looks like here.
Possess both male and female parts. The stamen represents the male aspect of the plant, responsible for producing pollen. While some flowers feature a single stamen, others have multiple stamens. Conversely, the pistil serves as the female component of the flower and consists of 3 parts: the style, stigma, and ovary. The stigma, situated at the apex, receives pollen. Acting as a pollen tube, the style facilitates the downward journey of pollen towards the ovary. Within the ovary are ovules. Once a pollen grain and an ovule combine and form a seed, plants need a way to move their seeds to other locations so they can grow into a new plant. This process is called seed dispersal. Plants rely on water, wind, and animals for seed dispersal. Plants that grow in or near streams and ponds, such as marsh marigolds, often take advantage of moving water to transport seeds from one place to another. Other plants that grow in fields, such as dandelions and milkweed, produce seeds that have special parts that catch the wind. Finally, plants that produce fruits use animals to move their seeds from place to place. Animals eat the fruit of plants, which contain seeds, and then walk around. When they poop, they drop the seeds in a new location.
So some ideas about how the plant needs at that point. So after that, what you can do as the teachers, then once again use an anchor chart to start asking kids, okay, what are the things that plants need in terms of help for or requirements for life? And they can start talking about things about bees can help out pollinating plants, or plants need bees for pollination, those kind of different kinds of things. And then those ideas, as you're introducing those or writing them down, then the students can record some of those or draw a picture of those ideas on their own handouts so they have a record of it as well. From there, they don't have all the answers to all the questions there of what would happen if all the bees disappeared in Central Texas. So we now then provide them with some materials that they can use. And in this case, what we actually do is give them a bunch of cards. This is the black and white version. There's also colored versions of this, but it talks about kind of the life cycle of each of these plants that are found in Central Texas. And as it goes through that, it'll highlight either kind of wind or insects or bees. So you can see out here on the right, the important role that bees play in sunflowers, right? So there's lots of different kinds of plants and then they can sequence them. And what you want to do is, as a teacher, is show them the cards, what's on there, what they can do with them. I usually just put them out on a table like this and then say, okay, you can kind of sort these, you can move them around. What kind of patterns can you find? That'll help you answer the question. And then once you show them the materials, you can help them make a plan for what to do with the cards at that point. And what you're trying to do here is take their ideas and guide them to something that'll work pretty well in there, and then they keep a record of it. So for example, once again, you can use an anchor chart and say, okay, the first thing you're going to do is you want to look at the information on the cards, right? And then maybe you can put them in the order of they go in. And then you can then separate the cards in the plants that do need bees and or plants or trees that do not, right? And then start thinking about what would happen if bees disappeared, right? You can start talking through that. And then the kids can then put your kind of overall directions on their own handout so they have a record of it. They can draw a picture, once again, working on things like sequencing. From there, you give them an opportunity to go ahead and carry out their plan. So supply them with the cards. They can start moving around, organize them, sorting them into piles. Once they get that done, they can draw a picture or write down any words that they want to, things that they want to remember in terms of observations that they made from looking at those different cards. Often what they'll end up doing is something like this. They'll set cards up. Here's the color version of this. So they can sort them as like, okay, here is a life cycle of a plant, but it's pollinated by wind. Here's one that is pollinated by bees. But that's the life cycle. So you can see where those kind of pop in. So they start getting this idea of like, if I remove the bees, they can't move forward in this life cycle kind of thing. From there, like I said, they can keep a record of any of those ideas that are coming around, that they're coming up with as they're making sense of those cards. And then what you would ask each group to do is kind of come up with an answer to the question. So what do you think would happen if all the bees disappeared from Central Texas? What would your group's answer be? And then why do you think that? What would your evidence be for that? So they can do that as a group and draw pictures, use words, whatever they want to at this point. It does not need to be a perfect answer at all. So then after each group kind of comes up with their idea, you give them a chance to share what they figured out. And really remind them, we're trying to answer this question as a class. What happens if all the bees disappear in Central Texas? And then we come up with a class argument. And you can show these kind of as screens to show them what's going on. So you can say, okay, the first thing we're going to do is what's our guiding question again, write that down so we have a record of it. Then talk about what's our class claim and our class evidence. What's nice about that as you're working on this is we recommend using an anchor chart once again. So as kids say, okay, what should our class claim be based on everything we've heard? Then you can do that, and then the students can then write that down on their own handouts and have a record of kind of the class thinking on that. After the class has decided how they're going to answer the guiding question, what we do then is we go to the reflect stage, and what you want to do is read a trade book about this phenomenon. So in this case, a little bit more about bees. They heard a little bit about the bees at the phenomena at the beginning. Then they're also hearing about plants, but now let's look at the bees a little bit more. So in this case, we recommend just the trade book Bees by National Geographic Kids, written by Laura Marsh. And what you would do is read this out loud, showing them the pictures. And then when you're done reading, ask the kids, well, what are the things that we already knew that came up in that book again? Like, did we already know some stuff that the book mentioned? And they'll tell you all those things. And then, was there anything in there that was new that we hadn't learned about yet? Was there something we can add to that? And then they can write those things down. Those become more of what they've learned from this investigation at that point. And then they can record those things, transfer those ideas from the anchor chart down to their own handout, so they can kind of think through those things and help remember what those different things are. Finally, we ask kids to write up a report to share what they've learned. We really think this is a great way to give kind of a meaning to the whole investigation. If you've been working all of this time of trying to figure things out, let's work on our written communication skills, and provides a great context for that. So we frame this around writing, sharing what you learned about bees or about the phenomenon in question with people at home, right? So family or caregivers. And to get started with that, we recommend starting off with coming up with kind of the vocabulary that they've been working on. We call these learned words. Like, so what words did we learn by doing this? And as a teacher, what you can do is have them bring up those ideas. You can put them on an anchor chart, and they can record them on their handouts. And then they can use that when they're writing their report on that. So as they write the report, it's not very long. It's really about 3 sentences. The first one is basically, in science, I figured out, that's whatever their claim was that they came from their the shared thing that they put in their handouts. And then I know this is correct because that's their evidence. And then there's a picture of what I saw or what I did, or how bees interact with plants, kind of thing. So they can draw that there. You as a teacher can then collect all of those and look over them. And then we include these rubrics in with all of those, because we want that you can use to kind of go over and give the kids feedback. We really want to create a context where kids don't have to do everything perfectly the first time, and there's just opportunities to learn from their mistakes. So with this, what you can do is collect those up yourself, or an aide can go through and kind of fill out this rubric and give advice on their drafts. And then you can meet with the small groups of kids or one-on-one to kind of talk over the things that they can improve on in their writing and fix. And then at the end, then they can take that information and rewrite it, taking everything that you've given them advice. And then you've got a nice final piece that looks really good that you can then send home. And then when people at home are asking, what did you learn today? They can bring this out and they can show exactly what they figured out, what their their evidence for it, their pictures, and they'll be able to talk about all the things they've learned about bees and pollinators. So it's a pretty cool way to provide kind of an authentic assessment of what kids have learned from these experiences. Now, that's a lot of information, and if you're kind of sitting and going, "Ooh, that's a lot to remember. How am I going to do that?" What we've tried to do with our lesson plans is make that as simple as possible to know what to do where. So each one of our lesson plans, we come up with, we start off with an overview, a description of the investigation, guiding questions, what students figured out, and how do you break up the activities over multiple days. Also include all your standards so you know what you're focusing on. Science, as well as language development and ELA standards, are all in there. Also reminds you about the presentation, the Learning Hub accounts that you can use to be able to download handouts, as well as use the presentation mode in there. We also include information about the content. So a little science behind the phenomenon. We talk about some common misconceptions students often have. We include the academic vocabulary that you're focusing on there. So that can be part of the learned words. So you don't have to kind of like, am I covering everything that I need to? It's all in there. You also have materials, so it'll tell you where to get stuff, what's the name of the books that you're using during the reflex stage. We also have kits all set up, so you can order a kit from us, or you can get bundles of kits for your entire book. We also include other books that you can go further with, right? So if you want to, if a kid's really interested in bees and pollination, they start asking a bunch of questions, hand them a book, let them read some more about it. Or you can use this as part of your stations as throughout the day, as having given them opportunities to read about some other things there. So we put some recommendations of some books that we find are pretty useful for doing that, that you can get a hold of and use. And then finally, most importantly, each stage and the activities with each stage are laid out in the lesson plan, and color coded, so it makes it really easy to see where you're going. So for example, on the left here, we've got stage 1, activity 1, which is basically showing the phenomenon, tells you how to go about that, what to look for. Stage 2 or activity 2 is stage 1. It's the opportunity to tells you what handouts you're using, what you can say as a recommendation to get started. None of this is concrete, it's just suggestions, but it gets a good way to get started. You can see stage 2 on the right side. So it really breaks this up. So it makes it easy. Like if you only have a few minutes before class is starting, or kids are coming back from recess. Oh, okay, I got this. It's an easy way to keep track of how things are going. Last thing we want to touch on before I answer some questions for this is one of the things that we do with all these investigations, no matter what grade you're in, kindergarten or high school physics, kids are going through these 7 stages of activities, right? The task, ideas, plan, do, share. They're moving through those because those help kids learn. But what we want to do for the younger grades, when you're thinking about their developing literacy skills, we wanted to kind of focus on a gradual release. So the table below starts thinking about who's going to be using writing and words and thinking to keep track of the progress of the class. So in the second row there, you've got kindergarten. You can kind of see the teacher is more responsible for keeping a record of what we're thinking and doing, right? So only during the do and the report stage are kids expected to kind of record ideas through pictures or words. By the time you move into first grade, we add another 2 stages where they're recording these ideas. That's the task and the plan. And then by second grade, we're hoping that there are recording all of their ideas as they go through. Doesn't need to be perfect, especially at the beginning of the year, but what we're hoping is to give them more and more opportunities to have an authentic need to use their literacy skills. So they're developing their reading, writing, speaking, and listening all in the context of science in a way that's really supportive for their growth. And then by the time they get through this kind of foundational kind of work, then when they start moving to 3rd through 5th and 6th through 8th, they're really able to do all of these things that using literacy in the service of sense making that we hope that they're able to do as they progress through their education. So with that, we've got a few more minutes. So any questions? If you have anything that you'd like me to talk about, you can throw in the Q&A.
All right, yeah, we do have a question from Ryan. So how do you include students in planning the investigation after the ideas stage?
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so one of the biggest things you want to do is you're kind of leading kids through this. So when you've got the phenomenon first is that they share all the things they notice, and then you leave it with, well, what would happen, right? Then from there, then you're saying, well, let's learn more about plants. But that doesn't really answer all of these things. So let's see what kind of plants we have here in Central Texas. So then you've got these cards, and it's really important that you do the materials first. So before you go to the plan, bring them over to a table, and you can show them all the cards. You can say, okay, all these cards are what happens to different plants in Central Texas. There's this kind of plant and this kind of plant and this kind of plant. And I'll show what happens to their seeds and how they're pollinated and all these pieces. Then from there, you can say, okay, if we have these materials, how can we answer our bigger question? Like, what can we do? So what are the things that we can look for? And then that's where you start putting the ideas on the anchor chart. And if they get stuck, then you can offer advice. Like, do you think we should look at only one plant or all the plants? Oh, all the plants. Yeah, that would be helpful. Why do we want to look at all the plants? Right? Because, well, some may not use bees. And you can kind of guide them through that. So then you end up with kind of a simple plan of basically comparing how many plants need bees to survive, basically, is what it ends up being.
Awesome. And one more question from Peter. He has the book. Does that mean I already have access to the Learning Hub, or do I need to buy something else?
Nope, don't have to buy anything at all. So your book comes with a book code. So there's a little digit thing. So all you have to do is go to the Learning Hub, adilearninghub.com, create an account in there, which is your name and email, totally free. Once you get in there, it'll ask you to enter a book code. You enter that book code that comes with your book. Once that's entered, it links all of the investigations that's in our master library to your account. So then when you open up your library, you can see every investigations in that book. And when you've got that, then you can download handouts. You can do the presentation mode, look up standards, look up all the materials, all of that's for you. And the best thing about it, that part's totally free and it's yours forever, right? So once you buy a book, you've got access to that. No subscriptions, no anything like that. It's yours forever.
Awesome. All right. I think that wraps up all of the questions. Anything else?
That's all I got.
All right.
Oh, wait,
Well,
actually, no, I lied. I have one more thing.
okay. I thought you might.
I do. Sorry, I'm losing it. So tomorrow we're going to be digging into 3rd through 5th grade. So if you want to join us tomorrow, which is the 15th, from 4 to 4:30, we're going to dig into a 3rd grade example. 4:30 to 5, we're going to do a 4th grade. And then 5 to 5:30, we're going to do a 5th grade example. So if you're interested in seeing what it looks like in 3rd through 5th, and how it's different in the K through 2, come join us.